Today's episode of SBJ I Factor is sponsored by Blessings in a Backpack.
Akshay Khanna was a part of the 2020 40 Under 40 class in his position as General Manager of Sports at StubHub. Akshay remains at StubHub in an even larger role today, and he speaks with us about his journey through the sports business, growing up all over the world, attending Middlebury College, and getting his start in the business of sports. I'm Abe Madcore with Sports Business Journal. Join us with our SBJ I Factor conversation with Akshay Khanna. Akshay, good to see you. You were a member of SBJ's 40 Under 40 class in 2020. This is a class that we're celebrating formally this fall. Looking forward to doing that. But first off, great seeing you, Akshay. How are you, my friend?
Abe, thank you so much. I am pumped to do this. You look good. And you know, I love following in the footsteps of giants. So I'm honored to be here. I've been listening to the I Factor now for the last few episodes, and I'm just excited to be here to be here with you.
Wow, you're a great promotional vehicle for us too. I love it. So on the
I was not paid to do that.
No, you weren't. That wasn't a paid plug. You know, on the I Factor, we always start with your youth. I know you and I connected because you went to school at Middlebury College in Vermont, which is the state I'm from. You were born at New Delhi, India. Talk a little bit about your youth, how that shaped you, and really your career decisions.
Yeah, I had everyone says they had an interesting childhood, and we don't really have a corollary, so I have no idea how anyone else grew up, but I had a truly interesting childhood. So my father, works for the Indian government, and that meant that we moved around a lot. And so we bounced around. I'm an only child, and we bounced around every 3 years, my father, my mother, and me. And so I lived in Southeast Asia for a handful of years. I lived in Europe, in Holland, and lived in India for a little bit. But I had not lived in the United States really until I came here for college to Vermont. I went to high school in Burma, which is a fascinating experience. It was a very different country then, even than it is now. And came here, like I said, for college. Now, I did have a lot of family that had been here for generations and for decades. And so I was fortunate to be able to be near them. They're all up and down the East Coast. But that was sort of the upbringing that I had. So fairly different from, I'm sure, a lot of the folks that you speak with.
Your exposure to those different cultures and countries, how did that really shape you, and what did it teach you?
I think it's everything in terms of who I am today. I think I would be a fundamentally different person had I grown up in a different environment. And, you know, when you're in middle school or high school and you're switching schools every few years, you sort of have to be more extroverted. You have to be more welcoming. You have to be more willing to take risks and going up to people that you aren't friends with, who maybe have been friends with each other for a long time. And it's tough, and I think it creates a certain character, and it builds at a fairly young age a resilience. And I think that's just a natural part of moving around. And you see that in a lot of, children of military officers or children of diplomats. And I think that was a critical component to kind of who I am today. And I think on the cultural side, look, I wish everyone had the opportunity to grow up with a massive diversity of cultures, because it teaches you that different things are important to different people based on their upbringings, and different words can have different meanings, and intonations can have different meanings. But most importantly, it teaches you that, look, we are better for the sum of our parts. We are better for the diversity that we bring and that we have. And I learned that at a really, really young age, and I feel very blessed to have been able to do so.
Akshay, growing up, was the plan to follow you in your father's footsteps in government, or was it, I know you did an econ major at Middlebury, was it thinking about business? What was the thought?
No, I very quickly realized I did not have the skill set to be who my father was. He's one of the most incredible people I've ever been around, and he is a huge influence in who I am today. But in many ways, I always laugh. I think I'm really the black sheep of my family. My father was in the Indian police before joining the central government. My grandfather, his father, was in what was then the British military. He fought in the Second World War. My mom's dad fought in the Second World War. My great grandfathers were in the Indian military before that. And so I'm really the first person in my family not to be in some form of government service. So that really does put me on the black sheep kind of end of the scale.
Right.
And to be perfectly honest, when I was at Middlebury, I'm not sure I knew what I wanted to do. You know, I was 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And I think like most people at that age, I was sort of going through the motions and trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And the advice that my parents generally gave me, which I think is true of a lot of immigrant families, was find yourself a financially secure situation so that you can grow up with many of the things that we couldn't give you. And that was some of the best advice that I got. And that's really what led me to exploring a career in financial services coming out of college.
And I know that, you eventually went to Wharton School. One of the quotes in your 40 under 40 write-up was that you realized at one time that you talk about sports all day, you debate sports all day, you discuss sports all day. Like, maybe I should think about being involved in the sports business.
Yes. A good piece of advice I got was, if you're trying to figure out what your passion is and you don't know, think about what you do when you're not working. Yeah. Think about what you love when you're not working. Now, there's no guarantee that what you do or what you love is necessarily going to translate into a career, but it's a pretty good place to start. And I feel incredibly fortunate that at a very young age, I was able to figure out what I was passionate about. And my time at Wharton, and I think this is both specific to the Wharton School, but also more broadly, a really beautiful benefit of business school, is that I truly felt encouraged to go and pursue my passion and to believe that what I cared about could translate into a job and a career and something I could get really excited about. And candidly, it was the first time in my life that I was surrounded by the advice of find something that you love, see if it can practically be converted into a career. And if it can, go chase after it.
And the love of sports started how, and what sports were they that you followed most closely?
Gosh, I don't think it is exaggerating to say that the vast majority of my early memories involve some sort of sporting endeavor. So I played soccer growing up all the way in Holland. I played for a couple of youth academies. I played cricket growing up. I actually qualified. This is a funny story. I qualified for the Dutch under 11 national team before they learned that I wasn't a Dutch citizen, and I was summarily kicked out at that point. I played squash in college and high school. And, most recently I married a wonderful woman who happened to be a professional golfer. She played on the LPGA tour. She's in the top 100 in the world. And so I've married into a passion of golf, and I've gone from never having picked up a golf club 2 years ago to now very proudly sporting a 8.5 handicap. So I have a good coach.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm fortunate to have a good coach, but sports have been a part of my DNA kind of through and through. It's the thing that I've been most passionate about. It is one of the topics I talk with my parents about, my friends, my wife, and really everyone in my life has some kind of thread to the sporting world.
Well, I'm sure the Dutch national team is regretting their decision as they look at this today. But so you said that you learned that you could make your passion for sports into your profession. Now you started and really were, I would say, one of your mentors is someone who's been in the news a lot recently, Scott O'Neill.
Scott is an incredible guy. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And, I think I feel so fortunate that Scott and David Blitzer and Josh Harris were building the massive sports business that they were at a time when I was graduating from business school. And I was lucky to get an intro into Scott during my first year at business school. I happened to be local in Philadelphia with Wharton. Right. Yep. And it just happened to coincide with the time when Josh, David, and the rest of the Harris Blitzer sports and entertainment folks had eyes on building something truly scale. And Scott was looking for folks who had experiences, a diversity of experiences we talked about before, not just from within the sports universe, but really beyond. And, he himself went to Harvard Business School. He has an MBA. And I think he recognized the skill set and the experience that I could hopefully bring. And I spent 2.5 years working for him and Chris Heck in what is really one of the most amazing kind of management team situations I could ever have found myself in at a relatively young age. And these are some of the best leaders some of the best managers and some of the best bosses I've ever had.
What did you learn from them?
Gosh, it's hard to know where to start. I mean, I learned everything from the importance of people, right? I came from financial services where there are a lot of things that are important, but culture and people and organizational camaraderie isn't necessarily one of them. And I learned the importance of that, the importance of surrounding yourself with people that you love, surrounding yourself with people who complement your skill sets. And I think both Scott and Chris do that exceptionally well, identifying talent, the importance of attention to detail and presentation skills, and an ability to grasp concepts really quickly and focus really on what matters the most. I could rattle off for hours all of the various characteristics that I think I was able to build during my 2.5 years at Harris Blitzer. But frankly, I don't think I would be in the position that I'm in now. I certainly would not be here talking to you if it weren't for those years and the mentorship that I received from truly some of the best leaders in sports, and I would argue some of the best leaders in business.
And so your biggest career decision or your biggest risk that you took in your career, because you're still very young, I should preface that you've got a long runway ahead of you. So, but as you sit here now and look back, what was the big career risk decision?
I think, by far it was, look, I came into business school having spent 4 years working in private equity, which, as you can imagine, very lucrative field. And I had an opportunity to go work at a private equity firm coming out of business school. And I turned down that very lucrative opportunity to go and work for Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, making a fraction of what I would have made otherwise. And coming in with, $200,000 plus of loans from business school as well.
Wow.
And at the time I justified it by saying, what a hypocrite I would be if I talked about following my passion. And now I was given this opportunity at a time where I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I didn't have a mortgage. What a hypocrite I would be if I didn't take the plunge. And if I wasn't brave enough to kind of pull the ripcord of going and doing something that was safe and going and doing something that I knew. And I had the added, quite frankly, I was in a very fortunate position knowing that with my degree from Wharton and with the experience that I had, if I crashed and burned, I could go and get a different job. It may not be the caliber of the job that I was turning down coming out of business school, but I knew that safety net would always exist. And so, I don't want to make this out to be some kind of massive risk that I took, certainly in comparison with what a lot of other folks did, but it seemed like a huge risk to me at the time. And I would like to believe that it paid off. And I think it's a testament to the people that I was able to learn from that, like I said, I would like to believe that it has paid off subsequently.
And as you're in your young 30s, early 30s, and you talk about leadership, what type of leadership qualities do you find to be important and that you certainly try to live?
Look, I think a lot of what I've learned about leadership have been traits that have either been passed down to me from people that I really admire as leaders, or things that I have learned organically. And particularly, as you can imagine, things that I've learned organically over the last year and a half, working in the live events ticketing business in a once in a generation event that effectively turned our business into nothing very quickly. Look, I think first and foremost, the best piece of advice I've gotten is, whether as a leader yourself or as you're looking for leaders with whom to surround yourself with, I really admire people who surround themselves with people who are not afraid to say no. I think too many leaders surround themselves with people who either know that they are incentivized to agree with them or don't have the courage to say, no, you are wrong. No, I don't think it should be done this way. No, what you did there was not the smart move. No, I don't think this is going to pan out. And I think if there's one character trait that separates the great leaders from the good ones, it's that the great ones surround themselves with people who are not afraid to dissent. And I think that makes a huge difference. And to me, that kind of stands above all. But there are so many other character traits that really characterize great leaders, right? It's people who are willing to put the time and effort into creating a culture that matters, a culture that is encouraging and inclusive and is nurturing. And I think great leaders spend their own time and their own resources into ensuring that the people around them are better for their presence and are growing together. And I think that's not something that you see that often, but these are all things that I have learned from many of the really great leaders that I've been fortunate to be around.
So when you were younger, and you weren't the leader per se, but say asked by the leader, were you a frequent and often dissenter?
I was, and I think that got me into trouble at times.
Right.
And I saw firsthand that certain people were more okay with hearing that voice of dissent than others. And I was too young and stupid at the time to realize that you had to take a certain tack in how you dissent with certain people versus other people. And hopefully those are things that I've learned in my old age. But certainly being young and impetuous gives you a little bit of a shield with which to do some foolish things sometimes.
Any non-starters for you I know in the hiring process, when someone comes to you, they've been fully vetted and they've been through a number of interviews, but what is a major turnoff for you when interviewing a candidate?
So I think a few things. Lack of preparation. You would be surprised at the number of people that I have interviewed who didn't do any homework on the company they were interviewing for, the people they were speaking with, the role that they were interviewing for. To me, that's a pretty big red flag, because if you're not going to prepare for something as high pressured as charged as an interview, are you really going to prepare for every single meeting? Are you going to prepare for every presentation? The answer is probably not. I think any kind of ethical red flags. I learned early that people who are willing to take shortcuts on small things are willing to take really big shortcuts and potentially get themselves into a lot of hot water on major items. And so to me, an ethical question mark is an absolute no. And that's just, life is too short to deal with ethical negligence and questions around business ethics or moral ethics. I don't have any patience for that. I don't have any time for that. And I would hope that that's kind of echoed across any organization that I work for. I would say those are kind of immediate no-nos.
In the last year and a half, you've mentioned it, at your current role at StubHub, Akshay, more and more has been put on you. More and more has been asked of you. How have you balanced the rigors of the responsibilities with trying to stay even keel and true to yourself and healthy and have a balance?
It's been really hard. I'm not going to lie. I don't think anything that I had done in my life prior to this point prepared me well for what we have gone through, right? I mean, just to tick off a few items, not only did our entire business come to a screeching halt basically over the course of 48 hours, we had to deal with issues around customer refunds. We had to deal with, significant layoffs. We had to deal with furloughs. We had to deal with question marks around our long-term viability as a business, combined with, an acquisition that we were navigating during that same period of time, uncertainty around when our business would come back. I think every aspect of the sports business was disproportionately negatively impacted by the pandemic, but particularly live event ticketing was hit harder than anything else. And it was really, really challenging. And I think I sort of leaned on a couple of pillars of leadership and of management that I believe hold true no matter the circumstances. Being transparent, being open and honest, being available, being responsive. I think all of these characteristics took on a heightened importance during a time when I couldn't see people face to face. There was huge indecisions in a vacuum, right? And if there's one thing I've learned, it's if you create a vacuum of uncertainty and you create a vacuum of a lack of transparency, people, it's human nature, I do this, everyone does this, will fill that vacuum with negative space. And so removing that vacuum, being as transparent as possible, being as communicative as possible, I think went a long way. And look, I will tell you, I probably failed on many, many fronts on this. And I have no doubt that 6 months from now or 6 years from now, I will look back at this year and a half and I will be eternally grateful for the lessons that I learned at an incredibly young age. But in the moment, I would not have wished that on anyone.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine the rigor on both mentally and physically of the last 16 months. But as we look ahead, as we sit here late June, early July, you're feeling more bullish as we see the industry return.
Yes, you probably saw a smile on my face just now. Looking ahead is a lot more exciting than looking back, certainly over the last year. And we're seeing the live events business come roaring back. So whether that's full arenas for NBA Finals games or be a close to packed arena in Tampa for the Stanley Cup Finals game, to projected full stadiums for NFL games, to concerts being announced across the board, both for the fall and for the following spring, to Broadway being open and the Foo Fighters playing to packed Madison Square Garden. I mean, these are all really positive signs, at least here in the United States. And with those positive signs are coming this roaring back to life of people demanding to go back to do the things that they missed the most, which is the human connection of being with your spouse, your parent, your child, your friend, and watching this really incredible moment that you will remember for months and years to come.
But as we come out of this with such fervor, what do you want the sports industry to just remember and keep in mind and be mindful of as we go forward? What were some of the lessons that we can take from the last 16 months and use them going forward?
I think the first lesson is there were a lot of questions that were asked 16 months ago, or by the way, 6 months ago, around whether live events were dead, right? Are people going to sit behind screens? Are they ever going to go back to a football game? Are they ever going to go back to a comedy show? Are they ever going to go and see Hamilton on Broadway? And I think the answer to that is resoundingly yes. And I am biased because I live the world of live experiences, but to me, that's an incredibly important barometer for us to measure how important it is to be great at what we do. Because watching people throng back to live events has only reinforced my belief that what we do in creating these moments, what folks on the team side do, what folks on the league side, agencies, retailers, ticketing companies, music promoters, like what they do matters. And it matters to a lot of people and it brings a lot of joy. I think there are more tactical things that the industry has realized, whether that's, the cleanliness of venues, the ease of, making transactions in venue as seamless as possible. I think those are things that are here to stay, right? The prevalence of a second screen in venue, whether that's to make a payment or to follow along with something else that's going on. I think these are all things that are here to stay and that are actually generally positive impacts of the pandemic. If that means that the bathrooms are cleaned more often and the hallways are sanitized and your seats are sanitized more frequently and there's more contactless options, both at ingress and egress, as well as during your in-venue experience. I think those are good things.
And then how would that have impacted your business, the ticketing business?
So look, I think there was a shift to contactless mobile ticketing that was happening regardless of the pandemic. I think the pandemic has hastened that, and there's an inexorable trend towards that. We're not going back. We're not going back to the days of paper tickets. We want to provide people the optionality for that if they so choose, and that is something that is very important to us. But that trend towards mobile first everything, from mobile purchasing to mobile delivery and fulfillment to mobile ticketing to get in venue, that's a technological change that, StubHub, being kind of the leading player in the space, is certainly at the forefront of, and just allows us to double down on that aspect of the ticketing landscape.
We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna throw you the 4 questions. It's more of a rapid fire, but be thinking about them. I'm gonna be asking, as you said, going forward, what does Akshay Khanna need to do better? That's gonna be one question. What is the advice you give to young people who want to get involved in the sports business? Question 3, give me 3 people in the sports business you're particularly watching and keeping your eye on. And my last question for you is, what's next for you? So you can take them in any order you want. So let's go. Okay. What's one? Let's
go in the order in which you asked me.
Okay, go.
So what can I do better? I mean, gosh, I don't think this podcast is long enough to go through that process, but I will tell you, I still feel the impetuosity of youth. I mean, I talked about this earlier. I would like to believe I'm still relatively young.
You are.
with that comes an impatience to get from point A to point B really quickly. And there are times where that is a good thing, right? There are times when making quick decisions and then monitoring those decisions is a good thing. But there are a lot of times where that can certainly get you in trouble, or there is a better way to do that. And I am learning that every day. And I really try to curb my desire to get to solutions quickly, because that is not always the right idea. And I would say that more so than probably anything else is what I really need to work on. And I think the people around me would tell you is something that they try to help me work on.
But you're getting better. Sounds like you're becoming more patient.
I hope I'm getting better. I'd like to believe I'm getting better, but I'll let other folks talk to whether or not I am getting better in that. If nothing else, I'm getting older. And so I think with age comes a certain level of wisdom and a certain level of patience that has never really been my strong suit.
Career advice, the advice you give to young people.
So the advice that I would give is, look, there are a handful of things that in my mind are critical, whether you want to be in the sports business or any other business, right? Words like resilience, persistence, passion, these things matter. I like being around people who are passionate. I don't care if you're passionate about sports or you're passionate about software or you're passionate about healthcare. Like, I just want to be around people who demonstrate a certain passion, because I think that one of my firm beliefs as I hire, as I recruit, as I look at who I want to model myself after, I like people who know how to think. I can teach you what to think. Inevitably, people who know how to think tend to do well in almost any sphere of life, people who are quick at grasping concepts. And so the advice that I would give people who are looking to enter the industry: be persistent, be resilient, but above all, be passionate, demonstrate that passion. And if you're able to do all of those, it would be foolish for someone not to recognize that talent. And I think that talent will be recognized.
I love the thought about the critical thinking and being able to think and having a passion of thinking through things. Third question, 3 people you're keeping an eye on who interest you.
I mean, first and foremost, Michael Rubin. I got to know him a little bit during my time at Harris Blitzer. He is building an empire, and whether that's, what was thought to be just retail and apparel with Fanatics, but now, as we're quickly discovering, looks like it's going to expand into sports betting and who knows what else. From what little I know of him, he is an incredible entrepreneur. He's an incredible businessman, and what he is building is something very special at Fanatics and beyond. I would say I'm biased, but someone who I've gotten to know really well is Amy Howe, who left Ticketmaster and is now president at FanDuel, and I think is going to be at the forefront of a business that is catching on fire and exploding in a really good way, right? That business, the sports betting industry as a whole, is we're in the first inning of what is going to be a really, really fascinating game. And then I would say number 3 is John Donahoe at Nike.
Yeah,
because Nike is undergoing a transformation that is really, really, really interesting. And look, I'm biased. I'm a huge sneakerhead. I love, as you can tell, I'm wearing a product with a swoosh on it now. I love that business maybe more so than any other. And what they are doing now, going direct to consumer and becoming more of an e-commerce business and expanding internationally, is super fascinating to watch. I don't know John personally, but obviously his background is incredibly rich and incredibly diverse, and it'll be fascinating to see what he does there.
No, you're absolutely right. It's one of the biggest stories in sports that may not be as well reported as it probably should be. And you are wearing a 76ers shirt, and homage to your friend Scott O'Neil and your fandom, of course, to that, to your local team in Philadelphia. Finally, what's next for you as we wrap up the I Factor?
Like, I think more than anything else, I am so excited for what the next few months hold. In and around the sports business, but specifically around live events. This truly feels like a phoenix rising from the ashes moment. And I feel incredibly grateful to be in a place that is probably going to see this rebound and is going to facilitate this return to live in a way that very, very few others are. And so I look forward to seeing very quickly how we surpassed 2019 and beyond, and seeing really a demand for concerts and sports and comedy shows like we've never seen before. And frankly, I look forward to attending a whole bunch of those, because a year and a half without them was a very, very long time. And look, I was hoping that one of the live events I would attend was a Philadelphia 76ers NBA Finals Game 7 triumph. Looks like it's not to be this year, but you better believe I'll be there when they do make the finals in the near future.
Well, very good. And I'm pretty sure that we'll be hearing and reading more about you and your career as you continue on your personal and professional journey. So Akshay Khanna, a 2020 40 Under 40 honoree. Thank you for joining SBJ I Factor today. We wish you all the best, and we'll see you down the road, my friend.
Thanks so much, Abe. It was such a pleasure. I loved being here. Always love seeing you. And like I said, you look great. So thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Right back at you. Be good.
Thank you. Take care.
See you, buddy. Thanks for joining SBJ I Factor today. Remember to subscribe to SBJ I Factor wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to our future episodes that will hit every 2 weeks.